Our goal for this lesson is to be able to add and subtract fractions. And again, they're going to have both positive and negative values. So let's start by reviewing some of our fraction rules. So the top number is a numerator, and the bottom is a denominator. If we already have a common denominator like we do here, they're both b, that denominator stays the same, and then we just add the top. So whatever these two are, a plus c, we add those together. And that denominator is going to stay the same. But sometimes, like this problem down here, negative 2 ninths minus 5/6, sometimes we don't have a common denominator. So our first step is going to be to find a common denominator. We have to have a common denominator in order to add and subtract fractions. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. We find a common multiple. So if I think of multiple of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, and so on. We do the same thing for 9. 9, 18, 27, 36, and I noticed, oh, well, I already said 36 in the other list. So they have a common multiple of 36. And actually, before we do the rest of this, I'm going to change this. Let's set this negative 2 ninths. Let's do what we were doing before, and let's make this an addition problem. So we're changing this to an addition, and that makes that negative 5/6. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. So I've changed this problem into an addition problem, and I found my common multiple. Then I have to decide, how did I get 36? Well, that is 6 times 6 to get 36, and 9 times 4 to get 36. So I'm going to use that to find the new numerator. Because if you change the denominator, the numerator has to change. You can't leave it the same. So since I multiplied the bottom here by 4, I'm going to multiply the numerator by 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And I'm going to multiply this one by 6, since the denominator was multiplied by 6. And that is going to be negative 30. So notice we're following integer rules here. And then I keep that denominator the same. You don't want to reduce either one of these. If you do, you end up back to where you started. Negative 8 plus negative 30 is negative 38. Once we have our answer, this you can reduce, this you can turn into a mixed number if you like. I'm okay with you just leaving it like this. But this is not the only way that you can do this. So let's first add our last step here. So we are going to add or subtract numerators only. Like we did below, we kept the denominator the same, added our numerators. So another way that we can do this, if you have a hard time finding that common denominator, another way is you can just multiply the denominators together. So 9 times 6 is 54. So we can use 54 as our numerator instead. And then I multiply by the 6 times 9. So I multiply the 5 times 9, and that's 45. And that's going to be plus negative, like we had all the way across. I multiply the 9 times 6, so that gets multiplied by 6. So that's negative 12. And then again, I keep the denominator the same. I add the numerators, negative 57. Now these values don't look the same. If you want to check to make sure, you can always put them in a calculator and compare their decimals that way. Or you can reduce them individually to see if they were the same that way. It might help if you have your integer rules out in front of you when you are doing problems like this. because we have a lot of that in here. We see changing this to adding the opposite. And then we had here -8 plus a -30. We know it was -38. So we have lots of integer rules we're still using with our decimals, with our fractions. So they're still coming up all the time. So let's add that down here just as an extra review, extra practice. First we make an addition problem. We did that. If they're both positive or both negative, we're going to add. If there's one of each, we're going to subtract. If we add, you just keep the sign that you have. Like we did here, -8, -30, they're both negative. We added, we kept that negative sign. When you subtract, keep bigger sign. So whichever number is a bigger absolute value, that's a sign you want to keep.